time is yours.
Kia koutou katoa, and thank you very much, Sari, Bertha, and Ailey, who's at home with her new baby.
Yes.
For inviting me to be part of this today. I'm a bit nervous because people have kind of been talking me up in the breakout room. So I'm going to share with you some of the perspectives of tourism coming from an Indigenous person and some of the challenges that we face, some of the highlights, and also how the COVID-19 pandemic has actually got some kind of silver lining, because it's made us rethink what tourism is for us as a people, and what we're going to deliver post, well, I don't know if there's ever going to be a post-COVID world, but in this new landscape of tourism that we're facing. So I'm just going to share the screen. I'm going to start with a hymn. There's a reason why I'm going to play my family singing this hymn to start and open up my presentation with a karakia or prayer. I'm not particularly good at singing. I don't perform well, although I can try. I'm not good at weaving. I'm really good at traveling and being a tourist, so I kind of get that. And that's why I'm studying and doing research, because that's something that I can do to contribute to my tribal peoples. So I'm going to share first. Hopefully it all works. It bombed out just before, so. I'm just going to play a hymn. Now, this is my family singing at one of the biggest cultural festivals in the country. And Bertha, please tell me if you can't see things. Okay. Many. This is my family. They are performers for the Tūhourangi Ngāti Wāhio tribal peoples of Whakarewarewa, which is in Rotorua. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our ancestry, about how we work in the tourism industry, and a bit of history. So this Waiatao song or hymn was asking for God's guidance and blessings over us, and thanking our ancestors for guiding us to where we are today. We are national, our family are national kapahaka experts. That's been very much part of the tourism product. This group here is the elite in our tribe, so I don't even get to perform in the elders group of the Tūhourangi Kapahaka group. They are award-winning national exponents. They also have travelled, and we do, as a tribal peoples or as families, travel around the world doing tourism business. That's our thing. That's what our ancestors have been doing. And on the national kapahaka stage, we are regarded as experts. So the National Kapahaka Festival happens every 2 years outside of COVID restrictions. And the tourists that go there are generally Māori, 30 to 40,000 people a day over 3 days. So it's not a small event, but the tourists or the visitors are actually Māori, which makes a lot of difference to how things pan out. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll just go back to my PowerPoint. If I can find it. Here we go. So kia ora koutou katoa. My name's Keri. Thank you to Ailey, Berta and Sari again for the invitation. Of course, making a profit is important for any business, but in my recent research in both Indigenous and non-Indigenous tourism businesses, the money is secondary to why people, or last on the list as to why people engage in tourism. I'm just going to minimise this so I don't get distracted. Owners and operators here in New Zealand are predominantly doing it for other reasons than money. Lifestyle options that extend on people's passion or hobbies, for example, creating farm stays, which enables people to move to the countryside to live. Sailing charters, we're sharing the love of sailing with guests. You get to go out on the water and do your thing every day. Or passion for protecting and supporting sustainable environments. And for example, in marine ecotourism, operators primarily, the goal is to educate their visitors on environmental protection of the oceans. For my tribal people of Tūhourangi, and I chose this picture because it's the spiritual entering of our tribe's village. It's called Whakarewarewa Te Oputawa Wāhiao, also known as Waka. It is the bridge, and I thought that's actually quite a good analogy to our presentation today. We call it the bridge. It's the entrance way to where tourists come into our village, and we start the guided tour from this particular memorial. We're also spiritually entering through a memorial of our forefathers who were who fought for our country in the First World War, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, and the other wars that our tribal peoples engaged in. So, what else did I want to say about that? Oh, so the owner-operators here, so for my tribal people of Tūhourangi Ngāti Wāhiao, my research has found it is about legacy, it's about identity, it's about pride, it's connection, it's culture, it's environmental and physical sustainability. And I guess in a Western business sense, money is a priority and that varies depending on intent. I'd like to share some of the context of tourism engagement very quickly for my family or whānau. When I'm talking about my family, I'm talking about 15,000 of us. And this is going to be an example of local Indigenous tourism development where many of us are disconnected from our tribal homeland and culture. More than 70% of Māori live in urban areas away from their ancestral land or roots. The question I'm going to touch on today is, who is tourism actually benefiting and how? And in the icebreaker breakout sessions, I didn't know it was going to roll out like that, but it was quite interesting because, you know, understanding culture is important to the people in my breakout room, values, beliefs, you know, showcasing food, dance and history. So my presentation is more from the supply rather than the demand, and how we create tourism and what it does for us. Yeah. So where we started seeing the negative impacts of tourism, particularly around the exponential growth since the 2000s, has led to the advent of over-tourism, where visitors were impacting the environment, particularly here in New Zealand. Visitors were desecrating sacred places. Locals were not able to access traditional resources such as nice fish and fresh produce, because those things that were traditionally gathered started being sold to large hotels, and the locals were pretty much priced out. Large multinational companies such as Airbnb have been contributing to homelessness. So the silver lining of this pandemic really is about how my tribal peoples and tourism development has been a chance to stop, to reflect and reprioritise what tourism actually means for our people. And I'll say now, it's not money, it's happiness. And so my recent research that I did at the end of last year, still ongoing, was based around how we engage our families back into the tourism product that we offer here at our homeland in Aotearoa.
Sorry to stop you within your story, Keri-Anne, but is your PowerPoint having different? Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was having difficulty. Tarawera te maunga, tarawera te moana, te aroa te iwi, tu haurangi te hapu, te Pākehā te marae, taupapoki te tangata, tēnā koutou katoa. This is a common way of introducing in Māori culture. It's called a pepeha. The picture represents a form of greeting where connections are made, where I declare my subjectivities. And if we're talking research speak, I'm positioning I'm placing myself, my ontological positioning, my position, my worldview, my place in the world. A place to go to recharge, to grieve, to holiday, to cleanse, to share with my lovely mokopuna, my grandchildren. This is my ancestral home, Tarawera. It's about 3 kilometres south of Rotorua. And for those that are not in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's about 3 hours south of the main international airport here in New Zealand. 3 hours south of where I currently reside. And through doing my pepeha, introducing my mountains and waters and tribal peoples, I'm recognising and acknowledging my ancestors and what knowledge that they've passed on to me. The context here in New Zealand is about Māori, about 15% of the population. We are tribal, we identify with these landscapes, with common ancestors, and thus our cultural landscape of names, language, tikanga or tribal practice, place and community embedded in these cultural landscapes. There's about 25,000 people in my tribe, and generally we share ownership, governance, and politics, tribal politics over these landscapes. So when you think about developing tourism in these places and to gain permission from 25,000 people, 80% of them may have left the region 3 generations ago, it's complicated. So when you see the end polished tourist product, there's a whole lot that goes on behind it. And one of the things that has been challenging my family and my tribe of late since COVID hit was, one, we've got no tourists, so the businesses have pretty much closed down. But two, we've decided that we're going to try and re-engage our people into the landscapes, because without people, without our narratives being told, without the knowledge being transferred, how can we then present an authentic tourism product, a product where we are telling our own stories and we are actually sharing our culture truthfully, our histories and our knowledge. So there's a whole lot of work going on in the background around how we engage quite disparate, disconnected peoples that all have a shareholding or stakeholding in our beautiful landscapes. Yeah, so 3 or more generations of disconnect could happen, and through a lot of government policies, colonisation, you know, the past has robbed our people of our language, land and resources. It's not just, okay, this family's going to set up a tourism product and they can just do their thing. Many of us are urban, and like me, many can't sing and perform like our experts on the stage, and we're not expert in certain areas of tourism delivery. So is tourism important to Indigenous peoples, and how does consideration of social factors such as happiness relate to my talk? I'm not thinking about international markets, about product development, but rather about how tourism can work for us. So it is also a place, this place here in the picture, where tourism started in New Zealand. So in the 1880s, my ancestral chief, Mita Taupopoki, created the space for my ancestors to work on their homelands, engage in the economy and develop a Māori economy that continues to this day. Essentially, British travellers were travelling here in the early 1880s to see the natural beauty of the region, particularly what was considered the 8th wonder of the world, the pink and white terraces. So alongside, let me just try and get this. So alongside our tribal landscapes and sharing our culture and histories, there's a very strong sense of making sure that we protect that knowledge, that it is not appropriated, it is not misused in ways that we don't have control of. And this quote here, this Māori proverb, tread carefully, for we walk on the dreams of our ancestors. And that's very much so. This, the background picture is the top of a meeting house front porch and taken in England where my PhD research was. So this is Keri-Anne. This is the village that I've been speaking about, and I guess I'll just play this. It's only a very short cut. So Keri-Anne, as I said, is a village, and I shall just try and make this go away. How do I do that? Keri-Anne is the village. This is our meeting house. This is our main place where we gather as a tribe, as a families. We get married in this place. We have our funerals or 3-day tangihanga in this place. It's got a commercial kitchen and a dining room connected to it. It's not for tourists, and as you can see in the doorway, there's a little gate saying no tourists or no visitors. This is the place where we enact our traditions, and at a drop of a 5-minute phone call to the elders that look after this meeting house and marae, we can accommodate up to 200 people just like that, and you won't find that in any hotel anywhere. So we commonly gather there. Because it's the centre of our village, we also, tell stories about this meeting house, the carvings. We have performances, and we've got a stage set up for the tourist performances. And this is a picture of me a few years ago, my husband and my Australian in-laws. So I too take tourists through and share my culture with others. Waka is also the ancestral place of a genealogical grouping of Ngāti Wahiao, my tribe. It's located in central volcanic plateau. And it's based on a whole lot of geothermal activity. So what we do is we gather there regularly to bathe and to cook. And the tourists get this too, but there's my son and nephew who are cooking our dinner one night. But as you can see, our ancestors were doing the same thing in the same place. So geothermal attributes are very much part of our culture, very much a fabric of our identity. And also bathing. We communally bathe. The bath on the far right, you can see the toothbrush and the soap there. We communally bathe. It's a really great place, not only to have the most absolutely beautiful bath in the whole entire world, with natural mineral water, but also we get to meet and see our family regularly, morning and night. For those that like to go there. The ones in the middle is, so that one on the right where we bathe in the mornings and at night time is private, it's not open to the tourists, but we also have another lot of baths in another part of the village that we also bathe in, of course before the tourists come and after the tourists have gone home, but that is also part of the tourist narrative. And then in the picture on the left here, that was taken in 1910. That's my great-grandmother and family and my ancestors who were also bathing in the same bathing facilities. So it's very much a legacy. And the beauty of having tourists come through there is not only can my grandchildren, who are city kids, come there and see their culture and learn about their home and their ancestral histories 364 days of the year, because it's a tourism destination, but also they can get engaged and involved in cooking and bathing and so forth and meeting their families. The other part of the village on the other side is our other tourist destination. It's the largest tourism destination in the country, called Te Puia, and all our ancestors' knowledge and narrative are embedded in the narratives that the tour guides show and speak when they're showing tourists around. Now, this part of our tribal landholding or ownership has quite a political history. We challenged the Treaty of Waitangi, the government, and they've just handed it back to us. Pre-COVID, we were seeing about 800,000 tourists go through there a year. And down in the village, we were probably seeing about 300,000 tourists go through. So you know, these aren't small enterprises, although we call them family enterprises.
Sorry, Keri, you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. So what is Indigenous tourism? The United Nations Declarations of Rights of Indigenous Peoples talks about tourism as being a vehicle for social change, for economic development, for all sorts of other social reasons apart from just making a profit from a tourism business. United Nations, World Tourism Organization, you know, their sustainable development goals particularly reference Indigenous peoples. It is a key focus at the moment of global development and tourism, and Indigenous people are actually make the difference between different nations. You know, the sun, sea and sand in the Pacific, what makes that different to what you can see in, you know, where Bali or Hawaii or other places. And so increasingly Indigenous people's culture is becoming an economic advantage for countries. I haven't got time to take you through what's happening in New Zealand, but needless to say, our national tourism organisations draw quite heavily on culture, particularly around marketing, around philosophies around protection. I will just play this, I won't play it all. This is the Te Aki Promise. So this is an Indigenous Māori framework of knowledge. That was...
Ko Aotearoa, tō tātou ukai.
New Zealand is our home. It is precious, and everyone who lives and travels here has a responsibility to look after it.
Te Aki means to care for people and place. The Te Aki Promise is a commitment to care for New Zealand, for now and for future generations.
To care for land, sea and nature, treading lightly and leaving no trace.
To travel safely, showing care and consideration for all.
To respect culture, travelling with an open heart and mind.
While travelling in New Zealand, follow the Te Aki Promise. Act as a guardian.
This is a deep and meaningful value of Māori people. Te Aki, kai Te Aki. We consider ourselves important. We consider it important that we always maintain our obligations to Mother Earth, Papa Tuanuku, to our to Sky Father, Ranginui, and everything in between it. So tourism, the Tourism Industry Association, Aotearoa, here in New Zealand, has adopted these Māori frameworks of knowledge and is using them and applying them, not just in marketing, but also in a true sense of we want to look after and share our culture, share our values, share our beliefs, share our landscapes with our visitors, but at the same time, ask them to respect our culture and our values as well. The Te Aki Promise has been rolled out in the last 2.5 years by the national tourism agencies. Just really quickly then, so what is tourism to me? It's not about really showcasing our culture. It is about pride, it is about legacy, but for me, what is important is knowing who I am, knowing our history, being able to engage in our family economy, being able to protect our lands and waterways through those values such as Te Aki. It's obviously my research area, and it's a way of enacting our values and beliefs. So tourism is quite a very important part of who I am as a Tūhourangi Ngāti Rāhiao tribal member. And, you know, when I first started having grandchildren, my eldest granddaughter, Pia, was born on the first day of my PhD journey. I started that day, and it was all about mā wae te aki taku mokopuna, who will guide my descendants in this world where they may not have access to their tribal regions, and through tourism that can happen. It's multi-generational. If we don't know who we are, how then can we present an authentic Māori cultural experience to others? And one of my cousins said, when we were having these big tribal discussions about shareholding and who has governance over our tribal businesses, she said, the shareholder never dies. And that really struck me, because that's true. My grandchildren will carry this business on, and our descendants will continue. We never die. We're always there. And, you know, hopefully one day, some of what I'm doing in my research will contribute to the future of my mokopuna. And I think I'll leave it there. I've got a couple more slides, but it's really just about tourism being a vehicle to share a beautiful place. It's a vehicle for economic development. It's a vehicle for environmental protection. It's a vehicle for social cohesion. And it's a vehicle for social change and cultural renaissance. So, you know, Indigenous tourism from an Indigenous perspective may be a little different to those of you that are going to visit an Indigenous tourism destination. And I encourage you to go and do that, because you're going to learn a whole lot more than what you expected, I'm sure. O reira rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Keri-Anne, with this wonderful. Maybe we can stop sharing now.
Yeah, I'm just trying.
So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you, but here a few notes that give me a very strong insight here is that Indigenous tourism for you is about your genealogy, it's about cultural spirituality, place and space, and how we carry in the history, the family history, and the history of those who come after that. It's about the past and the future and how that flows really well. The other thing is multi-generational, you know, and it's about showing the authentic and revolving the identity as a collective, as your tribe. And what is very interesting is that what does it do for us? Of course, it's for social change, but it's more beyond that. It's about protection and respect, and carry on this Te Aki promises as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, let's open for the discussion. Any questions? Do we have any questions in the chat or people welcome? Do we have any questions? Berta, you may have a question.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Keri-Anne. It's very interesting, and I've really enjoyed listening to you. I was wondering, you spoke about you're living in Auckland now, and you're from Rotorua, and being sometimes not in that place for multiple generations. How do you view that you're having the place that you're coming from, where you belong, but you're not living in that place? Can you say anything about that?
I guess that's the beauty of having tourism in that place, and it's quite unique. I mean, not all Māori tribes have tourist villages, and you know, the village, we've got a home in the village. I've got a home just outside the village, and we regularly go back, so we are connected, but there's a lot of the tribal members that aren't, and that's kind of a challenge that we've been faced with, because that's the whole idea of Manaingatanga, or the importance of being a Māori is knowing who you are and how you're connected. And so, you know, and as I said, when I started having grandchildren, I realised, gosh, you know, my generation is responsible to make sure that that culture and connection is kept. And so I started engaging in tribal politics, which is really an interesting space. But having said that, when we are in Auckland, we create the spaces as well. So, and that was my PhD research title, was Māori Spaces in Foreign Places. So I looked at how Māori spaces are actually created outside of our tribal regions. And I looked at a quite extreme example where a Māori space had been created in England. So, you know, there is possibilities to connect, but, you know, I'm doing some research with NZTRI at the moment, and, you know, what I've heard from Māori tourism operators is it's about getting their descendants or their children and grandchildren and tribal peoples back on the water, learning about their ancestral knowledge. So it's not, and, you know, that's primary. It's not about the business, although, you know, we want to make a profit. The profit for ours doesn't go to the shareholders. The profit goes into maintaining the village, making sure that our baths are still created, looked after, you know, the rates are paid, the rubbish is taken, so yeah, and the facilities are maintained. So there's different, and education scholarships, you know, dental work if tribal members want that. So the money doesn't actually, the profit doesn't actually go directly to the shareholders. So yeah, quite a different way of managing that.
Yeah, thank you. I just see that Debbie raised her hand. Maybe you can unmute yourself, Debbie, and ask.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. Keri-Anne, thanks. This is really fascinating, and I have to say that I'm really fortunate to have visited Whakarewarewa and Te Puia both, and agree that visitors will be somewhat transformed, I think, by the experiences there. I'm keen, it sounds like you talked about the shift, one of the shifts, and maybe it's been happening pre-COVID, but one of the shifts through COVID is really re-engaging your own whānau and bringing them back to be part of the tourism businesses. I'm curious, so I think there's shifts, I'm in tourism, and there's all sorts of different shifts around, you know, our market and who our visitors are. So it's really interesting for me to hear you say that. I'm curious about other shifts or conversations, if you're able to share, that may have happened through COVID.
It was actually really surprising. It was actually really surprising when I went to our tribal meeting at the meeting house there, and we were all talking about where to from here, and that was after first lockdown. And, you know, who knew that we were going to go into 2 years of lockdowns and stuff like that. So at that stage we were talking about, okay, well, what's it going to look like? So when COVID level 3 lockdown happened, the first one in March 2020, I just had a brain got then, some of us were like, yeah, let's open up again, we'll just pivot to the domestic market. And then we realised really quickly, like within a few minutes of discussing that the domestic market doesn't really like going to multicultural things. And that's, you know, our society at the moment. So, you know, things like, okay, well, what are we going to offer if we're going to offer to domestic markets? So they pivoted to just really, for a short time in the village, they pivoted to offering a geothermal walk by our guided tours, tour guides. So through doing that, of course, the tour guides were taking them to the baths, to the and talking a bit about our culture, but we didn't have cultural shows and stuff like that. But, you know, we limped along, and during the lockdowns, we had this very big concern about our kaumātua that were living in the village. our elders. So they closed the village for everyone, including us, that didn't live in there. And the villagers then didn't want to reopen it when the threat had kind of subsided a little bit. So we had quite a strong meeting, tribal meeting about that. And what was really interesting, because our family in 1886 endured the Tarawera eruption, volcanic eruption, which wiped out the pink and white terraces and those beautiful things that I was talking about up at Tarawera. So they, kind of moved Whakarewarua. And that was how we were framing as a tribe, how we were framing our response. So we were saying, how did we respond? How did we create resilience to keep going after 1886 eruption? And that was a time when we lost all our homes, our food supply, our industry and economy and everything. So that's how we started framing it. And my sister actually formulated her PhD topic on that. So she's doing her PhD topic is on Indigenous responses to resilience and Indigenous responses to crisis.
Yeah.
So and our tribe have got a framework on how we did that. One of the things that the business asked me to do in some research over Christmas was, how do you re-engage those villagers into tourism? Because essentially they live in a village where tourists have come. They open their front windows and tourists are walking past. That's just a natural given. But while we had the lockdown, they realised, oh, we don't want to do that anymore. What benefit do we get out of tourists walking past our front door? So that was my challenge over Christmas holidays, was engaging that. So rather than starting with the tribe, because there's hundreds of us that were in that meeting, I decided to start with my family. And my family being my great-grandfather, his 7 brothers and 1 sister's children and grandchildren. So we did an ancestral footprint. So we went up to Tarawera and we guided ourselves around and told stories. And I don't know if I can show you this book. I don't want to show you my grandchild's. This book came from it. Oh, how can I do this?
You can see.
Yeah, but put it closer to the camera maybe, or your face.
Oh, no, okay. Oh.
No, yeah, there we go.
Martha and Paya are my great-great-great-grandparents. So we just had a book, each family line wrote vignettes, which then can contribute to the tourism narrative, because we've got a whole lot of really cool stories and our family want to share that. I also asked each representative of each line what they thought of tourism, and many of them said, nah, we don't want to get tourists back in here and it's not about profit. We're not selling our culture like that. But then they talked about how magic it was growing up in the village, and being a penny diver and being tour guides, and how our grandmothers and stuff have operated certain things. So yeah, it's not easy. It's a short answer. But it's interesting, and some really cool stuff's happened.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Wonderful. We have Muhammad, and then we have Hannah from Indonesia after Muhammad. Yes,
hi, Keri-Anne. Thank you so much for the presentation, which showed that tourism can give a lot more than just economic vehicles. And your last slides really get me into the questions, because it's shown that tourism can be a vehicle for any types of developments rather than just for economic development. And coming from the developing country myself, as in Indonesia, sometimes our country, when we develop tourism, forget about anything else rather than other than just economic development. And my question is, what can we do as academic, or maybe as a part of a nations, to kind of remind our nations or what is our role in try to develop tourism as and get optimum benefit from tourism development in the future.
I'll just share my experience because I'm not really, I don't have big, the answer's quite big, but I have been going to, as part of lecturing in our School of Tourism and Hospitality, I get to join the tourism industry Aotearoa Association, which is a national association of businesses in tourism. They do all sorts of things. They also work with Tourism New Zealand for marketing, and they're the ones that have kind of co-developed the Te Aki Promise. So I got down to the symposium when the Te Aki Promise was launched. It was a huge thing. I could only see one other Māori in the room of 300 plus people at the conference. And I actually asked the question of, why is there not more of a Māori presence? And even when they had a panel up, the panelists with the only other Māori in the room, he stood up and introduced himself, and he said, sorry, my name's not on the conference, the conference documentation, because I only got on here this morning. So he had to actually force himself onto this this national industry body's panel for the conference. And I thought, isn't this ironic that they're using this whole concept of Te Aki, this deep and meaningful Māori value, which, I'm really happy they have, because it's beautiful, and it really communicates how I feel and many other Māori feel about protecting our environment. However, we are absent. So in answer to your question, Mama, just really quickly, is I push back a lot, and I sometimes feel like I'm a troublemaker, and I really would like friends, especially in academia. I know one other Māori who's at Otago University, who focuses on Māori tourism. Other researchers do, however, that's kind of our focus. So there's not many of us. So we're not going to magic up a whole lot of academics doing research from a Māori woman's perspective. But we do need friends, and friends with a critical lens, friends that don't just accept the status quo, friends that consider that there are other perspectives to tourism development, that marketing is not everything, and that appropriating people's cultures to use in that marketing the benefits must. How can you celebrate a culture if you're not engaging with that culture? How can you market something that's not what you're marketing for, for the people that are being showcased? And Tourism New Zealand, the 100% Pure campaign is a prime example. The first imagery many, many years ago was of a Māori man and a Pākehā tourist, I think, doing a hongi. The Māori man had it painted on tāmoko. It was so fake and didn't really represent us as a culture. It was just there to sell to international tourists. So yeah, having friends, critical lens, recognition that Indigenous peoples are not to be sold. Yeah, and that most Indigenous peoples come from, we believe that Mother Earth and Sky Father are important.
Thank you for your answer, Keri-Anne. It's very inspirational. Hopefully, I can do this. I can do the same for me.
Yay!
Can I just add to that?
Yes, Caroline.
As academics, if we're doing anything in tourism research at all, And, you know, I know Daifan and Berta and others are soon to put that, what I call the PhD cloak around their shoulders. And as I've spoken to you, that comes with, to my way of thinking, a bit of a responsibility. I think every time that we recognise things like this, or we see this, it's a personal bugbear about Tourism New Zealand for a start. I do believe that it is up to each one of us to be vocal. And I just grabbed one of my favourite quotes at the moment, which is by Dante Alighieri, which also Martin Luther King Jr., I think you'll be familiar with it. And that is that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality and say nothing. And I think it is for all of us. It is not just for Keri-Anne to go along to a tourism industry or academic they're all tarred with the same brush. And to say, well, how come there is not representation when you are launching and taking from a concept, from a value system that is perhaps one that we should be very reverent in the way that we use it. To just sit and do that and commercialise it and market it. And I wonder really how many of you have ever heard of the Te Āki Promise, by the way, but I won't say that. So I would just say that every single one of us on each one of these beautiful little squares on a Friday afternoon on Zoom actually
thank you for
have
coming.
A responsibility that when we see that sort of, I'm not allowed to swear, Keri, that sort of thing, that we are also vocal. So Daifan, in time when we put that silly hat on your head and that cloak around your shoulders, your beautiful quiet nature is great, but you will find your voice and you will raise these things. With love, as Sari always tells us, with love.
With love, with aroha. I have one more from Indonesia. I think this is, sorry, the time, but we still have people are welcome to leave if they have other appointment. We're supposed to be finished at 5, but this is from Indonesia. So thank you for interesting presentation. I know that in Eastern Indonesia, for your information, is a very remote and, often neglected in the development. There are some traditional villages and their houses, traditional houses as well. What I know that is very, very much neglected, or but becoming the very important tourist destination. So they start starting tourism business, welcoming tourists to their village, earn some money from ticketing. So they are first generation of tourism in their village. With the current uncertainty condition in tourism, and they're usually far away from from the central or the district, the capital of the district, from developed area. I was wondering how to get their resilience in the first year. Would their life have been better after tourism, or the other way around? Can you share a bit of experience? I think this is a concern very much in Indonesia. Yeah.
What? Sorry, ask the question again.
The first year. So how to get their resilience in their first year? Would their life have been better after tourism, or it could be the other way around? It could be do more harm to their culture and the people.
I don't know. I guess it depends who's got the control and how it's managed. The complexities of having 25,000 people owning a piece of land that we are operating on is immense, and we have used our cultural ways of communication. We have looked at ancestral knowledge. We've looked at experiences, since the 1880s. And we also have a lot of expertise in the industry. I mean, we've been doing it. I mean, we're the first ones to start tourism in the country, probably, arguably. So we've been doing it a long time, and you know, we do know how to lobby and stuff like that, but not all Māori are doing that either. So I'm not really sure. I'd probably need to talk to you a little bit more about the context in Indonesia. I do have to kind of mention around all of this, though, that I got invited to the Taipei Trade Fair as a presenter, as a guest, to present Indigenous tourism in the seminar there. Now, this is the biggest tourism trade fair in the world, probably, definitely in Asia. Oh, no, it won't be the world. Yeah, in Asia. And I got there and I was really surprised because I've got, I call them brothers, they're Indigenous Taiwanese brothers there, and they weren't even invited, or they didn't even know that I was coming up and stuff like that. And I thought, you know, isn't it funny that the countries that we're in, we're not invited to share our expertise or knowledge about how perhaps we could address these issues around, you know, recovery and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just a thing. You know, I was invited to Paris as well, and I'm not sure if there is any Indigenous Parisians, but I felt really lonely because in this conference that I was presenting at, I was the only Indigenous person at an Indigenous tourism conference. It just is how it is with research and access to the industry.
Can I ask one question that follows on from what you were talking about?
Yes,
is there sort of like a national movement of Indigenous tourism? Is there sort of you know, a way of networking with other Indigenous? Because it seems to me the First Nations in Canada and America, and you're absolutely right, in Taiwan, you know, there is clearly you're all facing the same issues. And is there, you know, with modern technology and everybody's on Zoom and everything like that, is there a way to connect and to create your own momentum? Thank you.
Great idea. Probably a really big idea. So there is a thing called Māori Tourism, which is really a subsidiary, and I shouldn't say this on the recording, a subsidiary of Tourism New Zealand. So they do all the Māori marketing stuff. I've tried to engage with doing some research with them. We have the regional tourism organisations. We used to have Māori regional tourism organisations. I guess in the context of New Zealand, tribes, we're not all the same. Like, we're not all, Māori are not all the same, and we all connect to our cultural landscapes differently. You know, not only as many of us urban, but we also, you know, from all walks of life and so forth. So getting tourism businesses together, it's been tried. I guess the World Indigenous Tourism Alliance, which has kind of got some momentum over the last 6 or 7 years, is a good example of bringing Indigenous peoples together from around the world. We hosted the Indigenous Tourism Conference in 2019 or 2018, I think. It was fabulous. But again, you know, people were coming from all over the world and coming from the same country and not knowing each other. Yeah, it's just, it's big. Yeah. And, you know, many of us want to gain access to those things that Tourism New Zealand are doing. You know, we do want to engage in the marketing of the country and stuff like that. So, yeah, it gets quite sticky.
Yeah. Thank you, Keri-Anne, and thank you, everyone. In this wonderful, you're right, Caroline, Friday afternoon, but this always our time, isn't it? Friday afternoon, when we're making connection. Thank you for your presentation. It's for me personally, it's very engaging, and I think I agree with Felicity that we need to think of how, you know, doing common good, you know, I mean, beyond the political things. I think there's always a space for us to create a parallel power to make a change, I think. Okay, so I will close with this me here again.
I've got a little
yeah, go ahead, please.
Thing?
Yes, please, Keri-Anne.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I'm reading the chat. I appreciate that. I was quite nervous. I don't know why coming in here, but you know, thinking I had 20 minutes and trying to jam in 150 years was quite daunting. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you all, and thank you for joining on this Friday afternoon. And I hope that you're all okay and safe. And you know, I know that some of you may get the virus, and I'm trying not to, but you know, heading back into classes in a few weeks. Anyway, when I talked about the book that we created a video about, you know, just our family, our great grandparents and their families' engagement or not into the tourism product, and I'm yet to write up the research findings from that, because all of these other things are far too groovy to write journal articles and stuff like that. But so the book was amazing, and one of the songs in the book my uncle wrote, and I think that's quite appropriate to what I'm kind of talking about, and forgive my voice, but I'd just like to share this with you.
Thank you.
Tiro tiro ki taku tau, kei hiara kei hia, kei ronga ke, kei raro ke, kei roto i taku moi moia. This is my uncle talking to his grandchild. Looking down at his mokopuna, the karawa asks, "Where are you? What are you thinking? Where are you going? What places are you? Where are these places? Are they above or are they below? No matter where you go, you will always be in my thoughts and my dreams." Nō reira rā, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora. Thank you, Keri-Anne. Wonderful. Lovely, very, very lovely song, very lovely voice. Thank you. Yes, very soothing. Thank you very much, everyone. And then we're gonna be in touch again for next month. And if any ideas, we have some people here that is gonna talk as well. We're looking into keep building the bridge of interdisciplinary and across countries and region. And the sky's the limit. Thank you, and have a good afternoon for everybody, and then stay safe and have a good weekend. Kia ora. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sari. Thank you for putting that on. Lovely. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Kia ora,
everyone.
Keri. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.